starting on YouTube?
Here, right.
Yeah, the power strips will work.
Are you making it plug in?
Yeah.
John, do we have an extra power strip they need to plug in, and we have this set up with for the mic?
Alright, for a laptop?
That's already.
We're talking about a.
Yes, do we have an extra power strip anywhere? You know, because this one is being used for the mic and all of this stuff here,
I don't think we have any other. Which gentleman needs it?
but those two.
I don't think we have any that reaches from over here to over there. The ones we have are about 4 feet long.
So you already did this, or you need me to do
No, I got
it?
it. That's,
You
it's
in
good.
YouTube and everything? Okay.
Let's get to it. I just was going to start recording right before we start.
So you showed her
Yeah.
that, so on Thursday,
She'll,
she'll just do that, and I'm just doing this. Okay.
oh.
Glad it wasn't me.
Oh, in the, where they agree.
Yes.
In the agreement.
Oh, so there happens to be a really long extension cord, so that's all I can offer.
Okay,
I don't, okay, thank you.
thanks, John.
Yeah.
Great,
Yeah,
that's
fine.
not a problem. You can reference that.
I don't think we did that one.
Agreement.
So right now, the only thing that I'm working on, because I started that,
No.
is that I'm going to get resume the recording as soon as they're all situated. And that just will record the actual Zoom in onto my computer for whatever reason we want it for.
Oh, okay, so that recording is not the YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube is separate. Yeah, YouTube is still, if YouTube is going,
Five, over. And, yeah, and then Kelly, when he's done, it will go to the, presentation. So I'll pass it to you, and then he can say next.
Where you sitting? You sitting here?
Yes.
Go ahead and, you wanna sit next to me?
Here, if anyone's listening.
Well, next thing you know.
That phone system again, for some reason it was disconnected, because I just checked that thing and I didn't hear anything.
On YouTube, it's coming out.
Was there?
YouTube is coming out.
Right, there's gonna be no audio because the
Okay.
phone line's not connected anymore.
So, switch to phone audio?
Yeah. Just take a picture.
We're on pause.
I think because council meeting was canceled, I think they took advantage of this kind of loss to do it. So I'm assuming they will work on it all the way until that line. Yeah, so we hopefully finish well before that, at least.
I need to move them, I just click this way.
Yeah.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting item followed by pound.
How you doing? You're good.
Send it.
Waiting a couple minutes for the change venue. We have a couple of commissioners who have confirmed attendance, so just we'll wait a couple minutes for that. Don't have any, that's a short, right? The joke sheet here. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here tonight. We'll start with the, Madam Secretary, can you please start the recording?
Meeting is being recorded.
Thank you. So we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so we will start with the roll call. Madam Secretary, can you please call roll?
Commissioner Alvarez.
Present.
Commissioner Calderon.
Present.
Commissioner McLaughlin.
Here.
Commissioner Ramos. Commissioner Wood.
Here.
Vice Chair Pham.
Here.
And Chair Morrissey.
Here.
Chair, you have one.
Thank you. Before we begin, I would like to remind my fellow commissioners to turn your microphones on when speaking and off when not speaking. And when speaking, please place them about 4 inches away from you. And it looks like we're short a couple mics, so we'll coordinate sharing. Members of the public may attend planning commission meetings in person or virtually via Zoom. I now invite the commission secretary to describe the way the public can access and participate in this meeting.
Thank you, Chair. This meeting is being live streamed via our portal at www.santa-ana.primegov.com/public/portal and to YouTube at youtube.com/City of Santa Ana videos. If you would like to provide a public comment, you may do so in one of the following ways. Join the meeting via Zoom, enter meeting ID 840-907-40411. When the item that you would like to comment on is being discussed, select the hand icon to let us know that you would like to speak. You will be called upon by the name you entered. You may also join the meeting by calling 669-900-9128. Enter meeting ID 840-907-40411. When the item that you would like to comment on is being discussed, press *9 to let us know that you would like to speak. You will be called upon by the last 3 digits of your phone number. After you are called upon, you may press *6 to unmute yourself. For those who are attending this meeting in person and would like to provide a public comment, please fill out a request to speak form and turn it in to the secretary. All speakers will have 3 minutes, and I will alert you when your time is up.
Thank you. Moving on to public comments on non-agenda items. Madam Secretary, does anyone wish to speak?
If you'd like to comment on a non-agenda item, please either select the hand icon if you're participating via Zoom or *9 if you're calling in. We'll wait a few seconds. Chair, we do not have any speakers.
Okay, thank you. And we'll move on to the consent calendar items. Is there a motion to approve item A, minutes, June 13th, and 18th? These separately.
I move we approve the minutes.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Wu and second by Commissioner McLaughlin. Secretary, please call roll call vote.
Yes, roll call vote. Commissioner Alderete.
Yes.
Commissioner Calderon.
Aye.
Commissioner McLaughlin.
Aye.
Commissioner Ramos.
Present.
Commissioner Wu.
Yes.
Vice Chair Pham.
Yes.
Chair Morrissey.
Aye.
Motion passes by unanimous consent.
So that concludes the consent calendar. Moving on to business calendar, I'll go through the public hearing protocol. I'll now review the process for public hearings so everyone knows what to expect. Staff will provide a presentation and answer questions from the commission. Public hearing will be open. The applicant will be given the opportunity to speak, limited to 15 minutes. Members of the public will be given the opportunity to comment, limited to 3 minutes. The applicant will be given the opportunity to respond to comments made by the public, limited to 5 minutes. Public hearing will be closed. Discussion will return to the commission with formal action taken to approve, conditionally approve, deny, or continue to review the application. Please consider the following suggestions when organizing your comments. Please state your name and address, strictly voluntary. State whether you support, oppose, or are neutral to the proposal. Statement should include all pertinent facts within your knowledge. Avoid gossip, emotion, and repetition. A clear, concise, and non-repetitive argument is most effective. So that will take us to the first item on the public hearing calendar, and that is the conditional use permit number 2022-10 for the property located at 3503 South Harbor Boulevard. Staff has requested this item be continued to the next regularly scheduled meeting. So we'll need a motion to continue this matter to the next regular meeting.
Motion to continue.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner McLaughlin and second by Commissioner Wu. Now, Secretary, you can roll call vote.
Commissioner Alderete.
Yes.
Commissioner Calderon.
There you go. Aye.
Commissioner McLaughlin.
Aye.
Commissioner Ramos.
Aye.
Commissioner Wu.
Aye.
Vice Chair Pham.
Aye.
Chair Morrissey.
Aye.
Motion passes by unanimous consent.
Okay, so that will take us to item number 2. The time and place for the public hearing on item number 2, site plan review number 2022-03, tentative tract map number 2022-02, and density bonus agreement number 2022-02 for the property located at 1814 and 1818 East First Street. Please note decision on this matter is final and appealed within 10 days by any interested individual or party. Before we begin, do any commissioners have anything they wish to disclose with regards to this item? Start with Commissioner Alderete.
I have nothing to disclose.
Mr. Calderon.
No disclosures.
Commissioner McLaughlin.
No disclosures.
Commissioner Wu.
No disclosure.
Commissioner Ramos.
No disclosure.
Vice Chair Pham.
No disclosures.
And I have no disclosures. So now we'll move on to a presentation by staff, Mr. Mario Ariano.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good evening, Honorable Chair, Commissioners, and members of the audience. The item before you tonight is an application for a site plan review, tentative tract map, and density bonus agreement to allow for the construction of a mixed-use townhome community on a site located at 1814 and 1818 East First Street. The mixed-use townhome community known as Cabrillo Crossings will consist of 35 units, 6 of which are proposed to be live-work units with 4 on-site affordable units. The applicant is requesting a concession from the city's development standards through a density bonus agreement pursuant to the California Government Code. The project site is currently a 1.4-acre vacant lot and is located along East First Street between the I-5 freeway and Golden Circle Drive. The general plan land use designation is District Center 3, located within the general commercial of the Metro East Mixed-Use Overlay District and Active Urban Subdistrict Zone. The vacant property is currently square-shaped with an L-shaped parcel attached. The land use surrounding the property consists of office to the north and south, institutional to the east, and commercial to the west along the I-5 freeway. The next slide I'm going to use shows a street view image of the project site currently vacant. The proposed project will consist of constructing a 35-unit townhome community, 6 of which are proposed as live-work units with 4 on-site affordable units throughout the project site with on-site amenities and open space. The unit will range from 1,515 square feet to 2,379 square feet in size. All units are proposed to be 3 bedrooms, some units with the available flex room on the 4th floor. Each unit will consist of a 2-car garage plus 10 additional parking spaces, which exceeds the code requirement. The applicant is also requesting to subdivide the project for individual ownership of townhomes through a tentative tract map application, which is subject to the Planning Commission approval, but the development itself is allowed by right. Before you use the site plan, the proposed site plan indicates the location of the live-work units along East First Street to the north, as you can see here, and the affordable units spread out throughout the project site, and those are identified by the little red slush. The open space plan indicates the publicly accessible area, which is located along the north side property line, which is adjacent to First Street, and the common open space, which is located in the center of the project site. The private open space is broken down by two balconies on the 2nd level and roof decks on the 4th level. Here we see a street elevation along First Street. Here we have the elevations for the west elevation and the east elevation, and the south elevation of the project site. Before you are the floor plan. This one to the left is the unit type 1, which is the smallest unit. Still has 3 bedrooms. The one on the right is your type 2A and unit type 2C. The next floor plan is a type 2B to the left, and to the right you'll have units type 3A and type 3B. And as you can see, this one still have available collections on the 4th floor. The project is consistent with the goals, development standards, and design guidelines of the Metro East Mixed-Use Overlay District. Development will infill a long vacant site with a new permanent use containing contemporary architecture that complements the area's aesthetics. Ground floor commercial space along First Street that will contribute towards activating that segment of the city. The proposed development requires a density bonus for 1 concession for the Metro East Mixed-Use Overlay District development standards for the reduction of on-site publicly accessible open space. The total publicly accessible open space required a minimum of 15% of the total lot area, The applicant is requesting less than 6%. The tentative tract map request will allow for all 35 units to be sold separately, providing additional home ownership opportunities. Conditions of approval, property maintenance agreements, and standards in the Santa Ana Municipal Code will address any potential negative impacts. A parking management plan will be included in the CCNRs, which will be recorded in the property. Pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, the recommended action has been determined to be adequately evaluated in the previously certified subsequent environmental impact report, number 2018-15, state clearance house number 200603141, as per section 15162 and 15168 of the CEQA guidelines. The environmental review number 2021-116 will be filed for the project, and there is no physical impact associated with this project. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution approving site plan review number 2022-03 and density bonus agreement number 2022-02 and tentative tract map 2022-02 as condition. This concludes staff presentation. Staff is available to answer any questions you have. And I should also mention that Mr. Alex Hernandez is here on behalf of the applicant, Angela Meyer.
Thank you. So we'll bring it back to the commission for questions of staff. And we'll start with Commissioner Wu. Do you have any questions for staff?
In your study and work with the developer, would you say that the facility is more geared toward working adults, or is it family friendly too?
I believe that will be more of a question suitable for the applicant.
Are you aware of any federal facility, either secret or known, that is a couple of doors down, a couple blocks down? Are they still there, or are they?
Not to my knowledge.
Can you repeat that again?
I was wondering if staff was aware of any federal facility or federal agency operating a couple lots down, or was there when I was looking at that property?
Were you not, I think the DEA is there. I don't know if it's true.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I think the DEA was there for a while, drug enforcement. Yeah, drug enforcement, but that might.
Are they still
10
there?
years old. Yeah, that's at least 10, 12 years old.
They're not called DEA anymore.
Yeah.
What do they call them? Stormtrooper? I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm just concerned if it's geared towards adults, or we're having such a facility nearby to impact use permit. I know that you have a lot of conditions you place on it to ensure that the property is kept up and that they exceed the parking spaces. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ramos, do you have any questions?
Yes, I have questions for both staff and applicants, so I'll begin with the questions for staff. So what stands out to me the most is the deviation from the requirement of public open space. So I'm wondering how staff came to making this recommendation, and how staff feels, or like to what degree staff is comfortable with that deviation, given that we just passed a general plan that focused heavily on the lack of public open space that's available in the city?
Yeah, so in order to satisfy that 15% landscaping would mean that the units would have to be either pushed back or have to increase in height, which would add cost to the actual project itself, which also may reduce the common open space area that's provided. So to satisfy the actual private common open space, I think staff is actually in the recommendation that reducing the publicly, open space would be suffice in order to now be able to increase the height of the building, but also not reduce the number of units on the project.
Okay,
If I can add, so a couple of things when staff is looking at housing development project, we're balancing between affordability as well as open space. Considering that the project is incorporating more, 5% more than what our code minimum requires in terms of affordable housing. So there are two additional benefit our community. And secondly, the project will have to pay its fair share towards impact fee for open space. So that will help with the acquisition of public residents. So that's the balance that we're weighing, and in this case, I think we have a greater benefit with affordable housing, especially for sale housing, which we have not production in over the years. So what we're recommending. In addition to that, the government code provides for an applicant to be able to submit to the city based on, I think it's 65915, allows an applicant with an affordable housing development project to propose through their density bonus requirement, also concessions, so that allows for affordable housing. So in this case, we have to consider it, but I think weighing out the benefit and considering that the applicant is going to pay into impact fee for acquisition, we believe there's a good balance here, especially with the additional 5%.
How much?
thank you. So I have a follow-up. You mentioned the additional 5% affordable housing units that would be provided. And I want to, just to make sure, the developer required to provide that to qualify for the state density bonus?
That would be yes, the answer is yes, correct, but our code only requires 5.
Okay.
Yes.
And then, on the impact fees that you mentioned, so I understand how that can be seen as a trade-off. And I'm wondering if the amount of impact fees that they'll have to pay, is that being increased because of this deviation?
That is based on established fees that the city has established for every residential development throughout the city that would be impacted. So the answer is a set fee for development projects throughout the city.
So the city doesn't have a way to increase or decrease that fee based on the same, right?
To increase or decrease that, it would require an exit study in terms of the cost for production, which we are, as you know, through the general plan update process that was recommended, we will be recalibrating our fee through the exit study.
Okay. And then I think my last question, comment for staff now is that I understand the need to prioritize affordable housing and try and figure out how we still provide some open space. So I know it's mentioned in the staff report that the developer will be providing privately accessible open space in other ways, which I think is great, but I still have this issue of providing private open space versus public open space when we know we have the great park deficit throughout the city.
Understood.
Thank you.
Can I follow up on a question that, you raised a very interesting point, Commissioner. I was wondering, are there any remnant properties nearby that their fee could use for offsetting parks nearby?
The Parks and Recreation Department recently did a massive park plan throughout the city that identified potential opportunity for additional parks. What this fee would be used for is going to apply directly to the area that's impacted. So the fee that's collected for this area will have to apply to that vicinity as the city is divided into areas of funding. So yes, the fee will apply to maintenance, acquisition, and development of open space for that area of the city.
So the process that staff use and the criteria is to when you allow for more density, bonuses and reduction in open space, you will target specifically in the neighborhood to increase more open space where there might be some availability using the fee.
That's already in the general plan and the master park plan, so it's something that we have developed at the city for the entire city, so that when development project application pay their, park impact fees, we already have a plan on how to increase the park space. I believe the general plan, through the update, is going to increase the park requirement to 3 acres per thousand, so we will have to readjust the fees to reflect that.
So how do we track this?
What do you mean?
Well, the building could be built, it could be housed.
Got it.
When will we
So the
see?
fee will have to be paid before building permit is issued, that's how we track it.
So it may be a decade.
What it does is that the funds that's provided by development projects, it's accumulated so that when we do have enough money to make an acquisition and development of a park, that's when the money is going to be provided. The applicant through the development process, paying impact fees, only providing their fair share. So the fair share doesn't necessarily mean that we can go and acquire an entire park that would be funded. So their fair share is generally put into a fund that gets accumulated and purchased and get made according to the master.
I guess my question is, how do we red flag this so that residents can say, okay, today, this was said, and this is our understanding, and then how many years it takes to accumulate, we see that there's a connection between the money that they're.
Right. So the funding that gets paid into, the development impact fee goes into a fund, and the park fees are divided into 4 specific areas of the city. The city is divided into 4 projects. This project belongs to the project that the funding will then be accumulated specifically for park and open space, acquisition, development, and maintenance for this project in the city. So their fund will be paid and tracked via, payment before the building permit is issued. It goes into part of a greater cumulative fund, and the way that it's tracked is that each project gets recorded on how much is paid and where the money goes.
And that was it for me, Jordan, I have questions for Scott.
We'll move over to, Commissioner Albright.
Yeah, I have just a couple of questions. So I was looking at the description of the project and trying to see from here, what about this project makes its configuration, makes the open space requirements under the overlay zone challenging? Because I read the report, but I still don't really understand it. So if you could explain that? Because we're jettisoning the open space, public open space, and I thought what I read in the report is the reason why we're doing that is because of the project configuration. If I'm all off, that's what I thought I read.
So the way the project is actually configured, in order to fit all 35 units, yes, this is the way that the applicant actually, actually designed the project to be able to satisfy enough common open space to be able to satisfy that percentage.
So it's more due to the size than the configuration? Meaning it's more due to the size, the 35 units, and the configuration of the property, say?
You're correct.
Yes.
So they could
Shrink. Yeah, right. Okay. No, that's helpful. Do we have a list of the 4 units? I know where they're located, but what the size is of each of the units? Because I heard you explain that, and then when you get all these maps in one PDF, my computer just slows down, because there's, I think, 400 pages in this one.
Sure, so I can actually, so one of the affordable units actually is going to be the live work unit.
Okay.
So that's going to be floor plan 2C. The other unit would be 2A, and then 2B and 3A. And I can actually show you on our floor plan. So 2A, so one would be what is on the right.
And the square footage of that is what? Do you say?
Yeah, I don't know if you can see that. I think it might be, 1 second.
Is that the larger unit?
No, the larger unit is a 3A.
3A?
3A, that's the larger unit. 1 second. Yeah, let's see. Go this down. If you can point down. Down, so it has a whole part. Yeah. So I believe about, yeah. I can actually get those in number 3.
That's fine, you know, the reason why I asked is I wanted to see sort of the affordable units were sort of tiny units. They're not, right, I can see that, but it would be helpful to have like not a legend, but just a table. Because I tried to find it, but when you do a search by, search and find in the PDF document, you gotta go through a lot.
Commissioner, we have our housing staff here that can answer the question.
Oh.
We have a code requirement that requires the housing type to be spread across, but she can explain a little bit.
Right, hi there. I'm Claudia Shaw, the housing program analyst, and I took their housing inclusionary plan, which included 2 units at 1,513 square feet. And then 1 unit at 1848, and the fourth unit at 1831. So we made sure that they weren't all small units and they were proportionate and spread out throughout.
This is more an opinion than it is a question. So I saw the design, and while I like the design of the project, that design, I've seen it in San Bernardino, I've seen it in Winter Park, I've seen it in Irvine, and that whole street now is, those projects are starting to look all the same. There's the one that's on the 55 at First, there's the, one that has the coffee shop at the bottom. It's the name. 1901, that was, yeah, right, so look, I think it's a smart looking project. I just think, that look is gonna be sort of what City Hall looks like now. It's got that 70s retro look, and people look at it and they cringe. They cringe now it's kind of becoming cool again. But I just thought I'd offer that, because I do see that a lot, that exact design. I think that's it for my questions for right now.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner O'Grady. Mr. Calderon?
Sure. I just have one question, just for clarifying purposes. So in the site, there's only one entrance to go inside, is that correct, or is there 2?
No, that's only one site.
There's only one site, and that's the First Street, correct?
Right.
And is that gonna be, gated or open to the public? Like, how can you go inside?
I believe it will be open.
It will be open, okay. My only concern with this is just because, I mean, I drive to First Street all the time, and I see a lot of transients around the area, and it's just like concerning, you know, with open space, and then I see like all of the stuff that's going on, you know, just for safety purposes, especially education of kids and stuff like that, so it's very concerning to me. I just want to bring it to everyone's attention. That's the only thing I have to say.
Thank you. Commissioner Lawson, do you have any questions?
A couple. One is, it was brought up by staff that there's a parking plan that is, or is
It's gonna be part of the, density bonus agreement. It's gonna be developed.
so it's going to be part of the density agreement also?
Yes.
I didn't hear that. What did that yield to?
So in regards to what's gonna be included into the, parking plan, is that what you're asking?
Well, I mean, right now, on the surface, this looks very underparked. It's a 3-bedroom unit, and how many, you've got 2 parking spaces, maybe 2.5, 3?
Yes, so under the Metro East, mixed use, plan, each unit is required to have a 2-car garage. And so that is what that plan requires. And so the applicant has gone forward and actually provided 10 additional parking spaces, surface parking spaces.
Okay.
And these will be open.
So it meets code requirements.
So it meets code requirements.
Exceed.
It exceeds that.
It actually exceeds it.
Yes.
The local crazy is exceeds, because at this point, it's, you know, it's by the standards, in reality, it's under. Well, we have the code standard that's been established in the code, so the project meets and exceeds what's required by the code to develop the project. So as it stands today, it's the code requirement. No.
Vice Chair Van, do you have any questions?
I have a few. I do agree with Commissioner McLaughlin. I know it's code, and satisfies the code requirements, but in terms of the values of parking, providing parking in open space or off-site parking that's not outside the garage, there an allowance for live work, given that these would be commercial in nature. Specifically kind of catered towards that use where it wouldn't be all just parking for the residents.
So I believe the way it's written in that port, and then it's going to be for guest parking. The live work units are usually to accommodate the residents as well as all other residents that are surrounding that area. So I believe there are also another mixed use or another development, residential development across the street. And so it's allowed to cater them and then allow for more walkability, I should say. And so it's kind of deviate a little bit less from the actual driving itself and promote more of a walkability.
So there's a specific parking allowance for the commercial aspect of the project.
Yeah, so because these are live work units, these are basically part of the actual unit itself. So that's why we don't take into account the actual commercial as part of the actual parking. In other words, if it's retail, we don't actually count the number of parking spaces required for retail because the actual commercial component to it is part of the actual unit, which is why it requires only two parking spaces per unit.
And she's going to echo Commissioner Alder's comment about how commonplace we see use of design. There's been a retroactive study on projects along the street that are kind of newer developments that have similar density in terms of the impact of parking once built.
So we have 4 projects in the area that, one is medium house development of Keystone. I know they were experiencing some parking challenges. We have another project that's being completed. These are also 100% affordable projects, so they actually have a much deeper parking reduction. And those projects have the parking management plan that's required because of the parking reduction. We will be able to gauge how those projects and the park impacts on neighborhood. They're not fully operational, especially with the senior housing project where we're starting to see a leveling out. But yes, it would should be doing this at some point in the future. I do recognize that while they read code, it doesn't mean that we don't observe issues with it. But for the purpose of basing and evaluating a project, we have to use what's currently an objective standard that's been established. If we need to change it, I think that's something that make this project bear that question. Okay. But what if that is retail? Or that live work is retail in some respect, but you haven't allocated anything to that. And a good example of failure on that is 1901, which is right down the street, which is a regular housing, not affordable housing, and they've had commercial offices, that building that they haven't filled in probably 5 years, maybe 6 years.
Right, so, and then I think your point as well, I think it's something that we have to, maybe it's time to relook at the need to address it. But currently, the parking that is provided basically assesses the, commercial and residential component of providing a rate that analyzes all of that. So it could have it that we need to reflect better on what the reality of parking needs to be for that area. So, but again, I just want to recognize that yes, that is an issue, but it's something that, based on the current standard that we have, that's provided so that the community and developed community can go by, they're not asking for deviations from our parking requirements. So you're asking for a density bonus, they're asking for a density bonus for the reduction of open space and not parking. So parking there, no cover.
Somebody said parking there earlier.
No, they meet parking requirements.
They meet parking.
That's what they're trying to say. They meet parking standards. They're not asking for deviations from parking. Well, I agree. I don't think this project should bear the run of what we're discussing today. But I do think that it would be a proactive move on our own to kind of retroactively look at these developments, see if these parking issues do bleed onto the adjacent sites, especially because I think there's a commercial parking spot, parking parcel right next to the development, which I would assume if I'm an owner and I have 3 cars, first thing I would think of is to park on the adjacent lot. Yeah, and so it would be good maybe in some time to kind of have a study on that and kind of redetermine what we think is best in terms of parking count. And I'm also curious, there was a iteration of the site plan that did not include the extra affordable units and had the, required open space or concession. Was that a site plan that was discussed, or did we just kind of went straight towards concession site plan?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one?
Was that iteration of the site plan that did not, go towards the concession of open space? There were adequate open space, but limited units. Was there a version of the site plan? Just to answer that, because I did work with the applicant from the beginning, and there are a number of iterations of design. But one of the design goal and principles that we provided to the applicant right from the beginning is that we should consider looking at incorporating affordable housing units into the site, because we have not had production of for-sale housing with affordable component on site. So we really want to help the project to demonstrate that it's something that can be done here in Santa Ana. But the information that we've had before is that it's just not financially feasible to do an affordable, to do a for-sale product and still be able to provide affordable on site, and that, options are not to build in Santa Ana, or to pay for it in any fee, but $15 just didn't work. So I think for this particular project, our initial goal of the Coastal City was to incorporate an affordable component into the project. So we've always worked with that in the beginning. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I had a couple of questions as well to continue what you were talking about. So instead of paying the fee, they are providing the affordable units. So, and then on top of that, they're providing additional units for the density bonus, so they don't have to provide open space.
Apply for the affordable housing unit, they become eligible to ask for concession through state regulations that would help to create the affordable housing unit without significantly impacting the project financially. So going back to your question, could the project have met the code requirements? The answer is yes. They would just simply reduce the number of units. We also have a requirement for the housing opportunity reporting, where the applicant can provide the units on site work with the applicant from the beginning to, demonstrate the project can actually build affordable units on site and be able to provide an opportunity for the, open market to be able to create affordable housing instead of publicly subsidized housing. So it's a choice. It was a choice that was made, and to help the project be able to develop its, financial goals and still incorporate the affordable housing project, they're asking for one concession, which is the reduction of the open space of 50%, reducing it to 6%.
Just to add to that, man, I believe that the minimum requirement to provide affordable units, I believe, is 10% of the total project count. So in this case, because it's 35 units, I believe 10% would be about 4%. 4 units.
So, the other question I have is in regard to, the air quality and, was referencing the indoor air quality actually because of proximity to the freeway. Referencing the environmental report and, 70 of the package. There's a general plan requirement there. I believe it's 1 3, yeah.
Preserve and enhance the aesthetic and environmental quality of the community.
It was one regarding,
Air quality.
Air quality.
Protect air resources, improve regional and local air quality, and minimize the impact of climate. That's the one. Sensitive receptor, CN 125.
I'm down page 300.
Are you talking about sensitive receptor?
Yes, sensitive receptor.
Consider potential impact of stationary and non-stationary emission sources on existing and proposed sensitive uses and opportunity to provide.
Right. So, I saw that we are proposing to provide the MERC 13 filters, which is actually a minimum code requirement now. So I'm wondering what we're doing that, given the location and the additional impact to the resident, health impacts to the residents, what we're doing over and above to meet that.
Based on the analysis that was done, which is included in your packet, that was one that was recommended based on the emissions and the amount of pollution that is being adjacent to the 55 freeway. And so, based on the study that was done, that's what was recommended.
So the health risk assessment was
That is
completed
correct. Yes.
for the project, and the indications were provided. I think it's a fair question in terms of can we ask for additional standards, and I think that's something we can ask applicants area, which is provided for the residents. But the health risk assessment evidence that the project does not require any additional standard other than what's now as a mitigation. That mitigation would reduce the health risk assessment associated with the Chase Freeway. But certainly, can we always ask more, and I think maybe that's something that the applicant can evaluate and understand to go to higher level for the unit. So maybe pose that question to you.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. The reason I'm asking is, just because of the way it's worded, because of the significantly increased pollution adjacent to the freeway. And, I did look at the, health assessment, and I think the measurements taken matter much further away from the freeway, where this project's located in this case. So, that's why I'm looking for something extra. I don't know what that is, but That's what I'm looking for. Do we have any other questions?
I have a question, for staff, kind of following up on, Chair's, comments on understanding what the requirements of them sometimes asking for more. I'm wondering if there were any conversations with the developer that included providing additional units, that were affordable?
So the discussion was to look at what the current code is like, and during the whole discussion, you know, who was in shape. In fact, we were looking at a number that is matching with the state requirements. The council approved something much less. So that the discussion was to comply with the current, or the proposed rule at the time, but now it's actually exceeded. Coincidentally, they also met the state requirements, because our housing, goal was matching the state guidelines and there's some bonus regulations. So 10% was something that was always discussed.
Is there any discussion to go beyond that?
No.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question.
Please.
This is in regards to the project, right? This letter we just got.
Yes, it was a letter, comments received.
Right, so basically, they're saying, based on, the legislation that's defined, which says that if they're doing affordable housing, we gotta pass it. If they, or if it's not compatible with the land use, we have to, say so in 56 days.
So I'll let our legal counsel provide a little bit more background into what we must do and cannot do. But state regulation essentially says that if the applicant applies and they meet state law, we have to be very diligent about how we deny it.
Which is what you were.
If we were to deny it.
Which was what you were saying for the last 10 minutes or so. Just wanted to clarify that.
No, that, Min, pretty much summed it up there. I mean, if the project submitted, meets the standards, within the code, we have to move forward with it. There are certain exceptions in density bonus law, there's certain, exceptions that could be found if there was, some form, of a public safety, issue involved, but staff has analyzed those issues and has not found any of those conditions present in the project.
Thank you, Commissioner Wu. Madam Chair, have we received any written communication?
Yes, the one that was, presented to you. And also there was a letter of support that was posted to the, website. And those are the, only two comments.
Thank you. So we will now open the public hearing. Would those applicants like to speak on the matter?
Chair, members of the Planning Commission, thank you for the opportunity to be before you with this proposed development. As staff mentioned, we've been working closely with staff over a year. I think from our initial concept, and there was many revisions to the site plan as we tried to accommodate this site. It was quite challenging. I think one of the commissioners picked up on the fact there's only one entrance. It makes the site very difficult to lay out, meet all the fire department, trash, report services, et cetera, requirements. We fully comply with all the setbacks, the parking requirements. We went out and met with the community. We held a community meeting, and we had 100% support. Maybe about 10 or 12 people that were there, residents in the area. We answered their questions. I think bottom line was they were saying, when you get started, because you can see the dirt lot for quite some time. So we're motivated, we've been working with staff, we've been working with the housing, group, to ensure not only that we're complying, so we in most cases, been exceeding, so the level we should be at parking setbacks. The one deviation, that I would like to expand upon that staff, did hit as far as, the benefits on private open space. Yes, on the, public, we are substandard, and we are utilizing the state code for a relief on that standard. But on the private side, we are far exceeding what the code requires for private open space. And so I think staff put in the analysis in the report, but didn't really call it out in the presentation. If you look at balcony open space, the units in every unit, every unit is a roof deck. The added cost to provide, but we're far exceeding what the standards are for private open space in this area. We did incorporate the live work to kind of activate the ground floor. Initially, we were proposing all housing, just pure 100%, no mixed use at all. That's been incorporated. A lot of gives and goes to make this thing work, and working with the property owner, adjacent parking lot that was mentioned. That just recently transacted. We were talking to them as well about easements. There's Caltrans right behind this site. There's a lot of different issues and challenges with this property. We did a variety of different studies through the environmental review process. There's mitigations not only for air quality, but noise. We have to do a little higher block wall. We have to do higher than code windows. A variety of different mitigation measures that will be incorporated in the environmental document and were as a result of the study. There was traffic analysis done, a variety of analysis that were done not only through our project, but the prior environmental document for the new district. We're fully excited. We're ready to come in, bring new housing to your city, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. So we'll bring it back to the commission for questions, and start with Commissioner Already.
Thank you. I just had a question about Brandywine. So I'm not familiar with Brandywine. I've been on and off the commission for a while. Has Brandywine done any, is that how you pronounce it?
Brandywine.
Brandywine. Oh, Brandywine. Have there been any projects done by Brandywine in Santa Ana or in Orange County?
Brandywine is a private home builder and still family owned. They started based in Orange County, and they used to do small developments throughout Orange County, anywhere from about 10 units to 15 units. That's where they were. Joining forces with them, I used to be with the Wilson Company. They did quite a bit of infill communities throughout Southern California. We started expanding the footprint. Today, we are doing just under 200 units a year throughout Orange County, LA County. We're also doing affordable partnerships where we're partnering with Orange County cities and affordable partners because we're both affordable and for sale. We're doing market rate rental out in the Empire. We're doing mini storage. So we're a variety of different things we're doing. We're still privately held, and we still have private ownership. You can see projects throughout right now, Orange County. I'm trying to think right now, we just finished one in Fullerton, Placentia in December, two communities there. We have out of South Bend, we have Carson, we have one in Long Beach underway. Quite a few units in the area.
Okay, so what is it about this? Say we were to ask if you build a fifth unit, build affordable unit, what would be the challenge to you of building that fifth affordable unit?
It comes down to economics. This was a privately held property that was marketed. We worked with staff initially during our due diligence period. We spent quite a few dollars in investigating the soils and all the other things. One of them obviously is what the potential yield can be for the property that equates to a land value. You got a private landowner, he's got a price. We incorporated the cost of the affordable units at 10%. That takes a hit to your revenue. Because just for an example on that, that moderate price right now for the unit would be just over $500,000 for a moderate income. Market rate today, the other units will be right next to them. We won't be able to tell the difference. We'll be selling anywhere from $700,000 to $800,000 in today's market. So just to amplify that, every unit you add it makes the economics not work for the project. And this site has been vacant for quite some time because the economics were not there. We're at the minimum. We've had to ask numerous extensions from the property owner because the process has been longer than normal. There's a representative of the owner here tonight. We're kind of there. There's really no more room, just to be honest with you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your Commissioner Collier.
Yeah, I don't have any questions at this point right now, but I'll come back.
Thank you.
Commissioner Thompson.
One question, you mentioned, Caltrans. Is that a Caltrans resident that you want to?
No, the reason we had to approach Caltrans is because the property is vacant, and there's historical flows from this property to Caltrans, all the water drains back there. We needed to approach them, and obviously we want to incorporate pumps and everything else, and we pump the water, so we approached them, we're in dialogue with them now on how we will maintain our flows at the same historical flows. We'll put underground tanks to hold it and only release that same flow rate. So, working with their engineering staff, which is tough, but we're getting through that process.
Thank you. Commissioner Wu, do you have any questions of the applicant?
Randy, the one that's been around for a while, made a lot of good homes out there. My concern is air quality of those units, since this right on the most busiest, one of the busiest freeways in the area. So in the design, how do you mitigate the that from the freeway?
I think the staff mentioned and the chair addressed there were studies done on air quality. And because we do urban infill, a lot of our communities are right on the major corridors of cities. They do provide the required MERV filters, and they have to be, when you're doing urban products, you gotta make sure you have enough room for those things to sit. As you upsize those, they become quite problematic, where you put them. They're pretty sizable units as you grow, and we're doing them next to railroad tracks, we're doing them on major corridors. Although that's not. Okay, but anyway, we look at that and we have to factor that in. At the end of the day, we're gonna have to sell these and market them. It's gonna be a challenge as to who wants to live next to the freeway, but we obviously try to make these, building model homes, where we're putting in the mitigations and selling. The livability is fantastic.
Did I hear correctly that those moderate units for the two-bedroom, 800 square feet might be possibly selling around 500,000?
The affordable units that we have right now before, would probably today, if we were to market, be in the very low 500s, high 400s. That's kind of based on the interest rates and everything else that are happening today. That's probably where the price would be. But the market is still, even though we hear all this slowdown, there's Orange County, infill, there's very few units out there, and we're seeing demand still for 700,000 to 800,000.
Is there preference of Santa Ana residents to apply, or can they be using?
For the affordable, yes, we do density bonuses, we do there's a local preference.
To be local marketing, part of the marketing program, we will market, to the city has a list, and we will market it. We can't discriminate, obviously, but we can at least try to promote, the project as much as possible to the city's list of projects.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wu. Commissioner Ramos, do you have any follow-up questions?
Yes, I have a question on the location of the affordable housing units. I'm wondering if we can see that slide again, that shows on the stars. Thank you. So a question that I have for the applicant is how the location of those units was selected.
I'm actually filling in for my project manager who was sick today, so I know she was working closely with Claudia in the affordable department. Maybe Claudia can provide that background for you.
Thank you. Claudia, if you would like to.
So I do want to make, I think, a correction because where the red asterisk is, I think that actually says adaptable unit.
ADA.
ADA units, yes. So the asterisk is actually very, very tiny, and you have to, I don't know if Mara or Angela just bring it up, because they are located, there is not where the rest are, but there is a black asterisk there that's very, even in my copy, I can't really quite see it, but I know we were going back and forth, and I had to enlarge it quite a bit. I don't know if you can see this.
Yeah, so the one in the center is one.
Right, right. So we had to make them proportional, we were going back and forth, because the initial thought was to just provide smaller units, and we said, no, this does have to be proportionate. We just go back and forth, and I can't see that far away, but I know that if you look, there's one on the bottom, and they have to be spread throughout.
So how many unit types are there in this development?
There's going to be 4 units total.
So how many, unit types are there, or floor plans, and how many different floor plans is this, for this development? My question is basically, how many floor plans are there, and are we trying to provide one affordable unit at each of those floor plans, or are we trying to provide them at large, for larger sizes?
So there's actually a graph that we have to do in an Excel spreadsheet, we punch them all in, and so it comes out with, because they're upgrading from 2 units, which was required for the city ordinance, to 4, the 2 units can be coming in at the 13 square feet, but the other 2 units came in at, one at 1848 and the other at 1831. So they came up a little bit higher, but they cannot all be at the small level.
But I believe all of the floor plans have 3 bedrooms and they vary in bathroom size.
Right, yeah, I think they're all 3 bedroom, 2 bath, I believe.
Yes.
So none of the affordable units have the 4 bath floor plan?
There's no,
I don't believe
there's
so.
no 4 bathrooms or 4 bedrooms.
Sorry, can we see the, different floor plans again?
And I think there's also a question, there is no live work also. They, in the end, it's not a live work. It's the 4 units that are 3 bedroom, I believe, 2 baths.
Correct.
Thank you, so that was gonna be my follow-up question, if there was a live work unit that was gonna be affordable?
Right now, there is not.
Okay.
So I believe there are actually 6 different types of floor plans.
Okay.
That includes the,
Including the work plan.
so that basically is 5 that are available,
Right.
and you got 4 units.
Was it considered to provide a unit with a live work floor plan at an affordable rate?
There was initially, but then there were some talks, I believe, me and Angela had some talks, and we decided to look at the new required. Okay, this goes back several months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was very happy to see the red asterisk on the live work floor plan. And I'm actually really disappointed now to hear that we're not gonna have an affordable unit with that floor plan. And when I think to the general plan and our commitment to provide a diverse set of housing options and opportunities, including those for purchase, I'm having a hard time seeing the alignment with this project and, not the project as a whole, but with that part, I really think it should. Is that something that the developer would consider providing?
Really can't address that, for today. I mean, there's obviously, a lot of work that's been done, economic analysis based on those units, and hopefully we can proceed here and, move forward with development. As I stated, to delay this project, could jeopardize the project. There is no more room for property owner. We have been at this for over a year, working closely with staff. The fact that we are exceeding the city's code, the city only requires 5%, we're providing 10%. Obviously, it's within your purview to request, but it could jeopardize the project.
also like to add to his point about the sales price. For instance, last year when the interest rates were, so much lower, a three-bedroom unit at City Ventures is selling for about $550,000. And right now, someone who wants to sell that same unit is at $525,000. So the price, the sales price is tied in, to keep it affordable, is tied in with the interest rate. So, we don't know when these are actually built, what the interest rate's gonna be.
Yeah, I understand that part. Yeah, I think those are my comments for now, but I'm just disappointed to hear that the red asterisks are represented affordable units, because being able to provide a unit at an affordable price that has that livable component, I think would have been huge for Panama residents.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Vice Chair Penny, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Along the lines of affordability of these units, doing your market research, who are you anticipating, buyers of these properties, either out of state or within the city?
We find that in doing infill, when we do this drought in California, there's a strong percentage of people who want to be in neighborhoods they know. A lot of your renters in the area, if you factor in the community meeting, some of the renters were across the street were already saying they want to buy instead of close to rent. And they know the Santa Ana market, they want to be close to their jobs or in familiar neighborhoods. But our buyer profile, it tends to be the new couple, young family, or retiree, more on the professional retiree side. It doesn't tend to be a big family. We don't have big families in these units. That's not the
Thank you, Vice Chair. I think, yes, I'll ask the question too. Are you willing to upgrade the air filtration, or is that something that's going to be economically, I think?
I'm not expert in that area. Obviously, we hire architects, mechanical engineers, et cetera. I didn't know what that would mean to upgrade, or how it would impact the area that's been designated for those mechanical equipment and filters. I have no idea what that need would be to upgrade. Become a different size of living.
And it sounds like I am kind of have the same comment that it would be great if we could have one with work and affordable unit. Is there any way we can swap or change out the affordable on some of the other areas that you may have for any difference there?
Yeah, I have to defer to staff. We obviously were being directed to comply with your requirements, so we did that, so.
Okay.
I know initially we also wanted a live work, and then I just know that there was some meetings held, and then I was told that the live work would not have to be part of it.
I really don't recall the conversation. It does make sense. However, I think, financially, the project is able to, that would be great if I'm able to, the goals for the affordable housing component. What we could do is, provide a recommendation for, as part of the approvals, to recommend exploring the feasibility of one, the additional, air quality, mitigation, and also the feasibility of incorporating,
affordable work.
Right. So that way, what it does then forces us and the applicant to really take a hard look at the issue and what we can do to address it. And make that as part of the recommendation.
Just purely on the economic side of it, one way that maybe to offset that is if you provide more of a smaller unit, because that, I think, this work is the largest unit, if I remember correctly.
That's what I was referring to, there's no way that not.
Can you change the mix and provide, you know, but that's a discussion that you and staff to.
So you can work with staff.
Right, so if you provide a recommendation that you work with staff to explore the feasibility of incorporating the live working unit that's one of the affordable, and then, incorporating the additional air quality filtration system part of our review before we go back to the city council.
Yeah, I appreciate Randy wanting this project, and Randy.
And I just want to share with you, we'll look into those, but, you know, state is very clear in terms of what its standard is.
Yeah.
That if it meets the standard, you have to consider it. I think in this case, what we're asking is for the applicant and us to really take a hard look at whether we can make the, those two issues incorporated into the project without financial impact. And also somewhat randomly and allocation, you just can't allocate the all small. Right. That's all the small margins you get allocated across the board. And that's a requirement too, which may not work.
So when you add in the, I take it there will be homeowner association fees, okay, and other common fees. When you add it in, you might undermine the affordability, and by making it smaller, you right now, it's pretty good size, for moderate income families to be able to move in there. And I'm concerned that if you start, you know, cutting and all that to kind of add in an additional, low-income housing, then you undermine the quality of an existing potential house. You're forcing a higher selling price to get additional homeowner fee. What? That's a good one.
There would be no additional affordable, unit, we're talking about maybe ensuring that one of the affordable units is a live workspace. So one of the comments that was made was that may be feasible if the other unit size is already considered, maybe one is 12 foot smaller unit size. But we haven't voted on that.
I just didn't want to see the quality of the
I
development.
think if you incorporate that flexibility into, your recommendation, then we can work with the applicant on looking at flexibility, reducing the size, and, you know, making it so that it would be allowable for one of the units to be, a workman, a live working. So if you want to incorporate that flexibility into the discussion, I think that will open up the ability to, potentially evaluate taking some of the units to the smaller size. I mean, you know, what are the smaller size?
The smallest size is, 1,513 square feet, and those are the two units we
Right.
provided at that.
So 1,500 square feet is still a pretty good size, 3 bedrooms. When you look at it, it's a pretty good size. So if the goal is to, also have a live work, then maybe we can work within that parameter to play square footage. Where in the market is this price support? Moderate.
Yeah,
Moderate.
Plus 80%,
Yeah.
120%.
120.
120.
Yeah.
Yeah, is moderate. Low is 80, right.
so you take cash?
If I wouldn't call this low income housing.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
So I have another question on those floor plans. So I know it was said that there were 5, that the smallest is just a little over 1,500 square feet. Can you please remind us what the square footage is of that largest unit or the workspace?
So, the large,
2,400 is 2,379.
Thank you. And then, from my understanding, if the commission made the move forward with today's recommendation with that added stipulation that staff will work with the applicant to see if we can provide a live work unit as an affordable unit, mine is affordable is up to 120% AMI. Does the square footage still have to add up to a certain percentage given the housing opportunity ordinance?
The housing opportunity ordinance doesn't have a strict requirement, it's part of the host agreement and housing affordability plan that requires the even side. So, I think what we're asking for is if you are looking at the goals to have a live work unit, you may need to work with applicant to balance out the other goal of square footage. So at the end of the day, it's working the numbers to help provide for the reduction, right? In terms of the square footage shift between larger sizes and for the additional commercial opportunity.
Okay, so we are looking at total square footage, essentially a total square footage of space that would be affordable within the development.
I look at it more in terms of the unit,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, it's going to be 4 units. 3 of the units will be for families, and one potentially could be for families with live work opportunity.
Okay, and as of now, we have 2 of those 4 units are at the smaller size.
2 is small, but this is 3 bedroom, there is minimum occupancy of at least 3 people. So a single person could just buy one of our affordable units because they're geared for families. And if it's a 3 bedroom, it would allow for up to 7 people maximum.
Okay, thank you. So I asked some questions because in us providing the flexibility for changes, it also would allow me sure that we're at least preserving what we currently have in place, is providing that additional unit isn't, or not an additional unit, is converting or making one of those affordable units or the work unit is not plausible. So I just want to make sure that we're also not backtracking and then hearing because of the feasibility, we have to make all of them smaller size. I wouldn't want that. So as the commission considers this, I want to make sure that we provide something with at least what is currently being provided is preserved.
Thank you. We will, does the applicant have any final remarks? Thank you very much. And we will now close the public hearing.
Chair, can we call the speakers?
Oh, we do have speakers.
I'm not sure if we do yet, but let me, go ahead and call for them. If you are participating via Zoom or calling in and you'd like to make a comment on this item, please either select the hand icon or press *9 now. We'll wait a few seconds. We do not have any speakers, and if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak, the speakers.
All right, thank you. Now we will reclose the public hearing. So we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion. We'll start with Commissioner Already. Do you have any comments or questions?
No comments.
Commissioner Colorado?
No comments, question.
And Commissioner McLaughlin?
No comments.
Commissioner Wu?
No comments.
Commissioner Ron?
And no comment.
And Vice Chair Pan?
I want to ask, is it within our purview to allocate some of the open parking space that's on site to serve the moderate income units? And what my thinking in this is that typically, if the units are 500,000 or a little bit over, still you can see considerations where people are moving to make this really affordable. And so we need to allocate some of the open parking to those units to make it more economically feasible for those who would buy these units.
I think when you're asking that, you might be creating other problems in their ability to do their parking management, because basically you're saying you're allocating, those parking spaces to specific units. What about the rest of the units?
And we have an allocation for X amount of units, or portable units, in comparison to X amount of total unit count. So I think that in the same line of thinking, you would allocate X amount of parking, available parking to X amount of portable units.
I think if we had enough open space, that would be ideal, considering that they're limited number of space. We really are looking at those parking spaces open. If anything, we would stress that that can't be assigned to yes. So that's really, yes, if they would have a large number of parking spaces, I think what we have on the site is just really trying to minimize the impact on street parking.
So it wouldn't be a situation where these parking spots are kind of raffled off to the residents as additional parking if they.
No, they would have to be retained in common, get on the commercial.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions. And I have any question.
When it comes to the work, how much of the square footage is allocated to the work center? And we said within the larger units, curious as to how much is being allocated to work.
Sure.
And how much is being forced.
You need to actually pull that information up. About 300 square feet.
How much floor space is work center? I mean, that could, in terms of where we are today, work is you're sitting at your desk and square feet is another bedroom also.
Yeah, potentially. But yeah, it's, would be about 300 square feet per.
Yeah, for bedroom. Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 or 3 workstations.
So I mean, it could be, I mean, you could have a 4-bedroom house at this point.
But you wouldn't have to park.
You would have, thank you, Alan. Yes.
The CCNRs can include restrictions on that aspect. There should be for business, office space, but not be used for business.
Where will that be controlled?
It will be controlled with the CCNR.
In the CCNR.
Yes.
So the CCNR is drawn up on this.
No, they have not, but that will be something that will be, done by the applicant and reviewed by staff and our city attorney.
Whatever management, parking management plan. Framework for the CCNR.
So the CCNR is generally done towards the end, right, of the project, when applicants have part of the reporting process. It actually doesn't, in my experience, if I recall correctly, it doesn't make sense for the project to even start the CCNR process until a later or a development time. They do have a master, format. What's important is that we document these conditions as part of the project conditions of approval. Our city attorney and our planning staff doing the stage of reviewing the CCNR, ensure that these conditions, as applicable, get recorded as part of the.
I'd like to make a motion, if there's no other questions.
Yeah. I'll call the motion.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
So I'd like to motion, to move forward with staff recommendation of adopting resolution number 2022, XXX, approving site plan number 2022-03, and then city bonus agreement number 2022-02, with the addition that the developer will be required to meet with staff and work towards making one of the affordable units a unit with the live workspace. And if that is not feasible, the number of affordable units, and the number of affordable units and their unit size, as presented tonight must be preserved. Does that language make sense? And then also recommending that we adopt resolution number 2022 XXX, approving tentative track map number 2022-02 as conditional.
Just for clarity, I believe there was also a condition discussed or a recommendation about the filters.
Yes, and I'd like to, ask our chair if he would like to add a language.
Yeah. Friendly amendments on that, to the work with staff to see if we can make that work.
That's what's important, because again, we're dealing with a state mandatory requirement, that we can't impose anything that would make it as national as possible. So, I think by providing us the flexibility of working on if the feasibility of the store and implement it as feasible, that would be ideal.
If the motion, includes the word require, that seems a little strong. Couldn't we say we direct staff, to meet with the developer, to include some of the discussion here to see what's feasible? Because requiring things, you gotta do it.
Commissioner, my requirement is that they meet, and I would like to move forward with my, the language I propose.
So I'll second.
Good, I'd like that. Additional.
What was the motion?
If I may.
Yeah.
Commissioner McLaughlin mentioned that CCNR is restricted use of work areas to work only. The staff work with the developer to develop language to restrict the work area of the work to workspace.
So, on the motion, here's what I'm hearing. First, is relating to, working towards implementing the feasibility of one unit being work lift, and giving staff the flexibility to work on adjusting the unit size, but not to reduce the size any further than is currently established here. And with a goal recommendation to the city council, to make that change, but it's a goal and objective. And then to ensure that we also do the same, good faith effort with the air filtration system from Mark 13 to higher, that's feasible. And then thirdly is to ensure that CCNR incorporates the minimum square footage of 300 square feet as mentioned, or very close to that, reserved for the work portion of the living.
So the word require is removed.
Well, it's required for them to meet. I think the intent was to make sure.
Oh, just for the meeting.
Required to meet with us. They can't just say, we can't do this, and we have to go through a process of, good faith evaluation of how we can achieve that.
Right, that's what I wanted to clarify, was that you're not requiring them to come up with the outcome that they discussed, but you're only requiring that they meet with you to come up with something.
That's part of it, correct.
Depending on all the other elements there.
Yes, sir, I believe, I accepted the friendly amendment, the chair has made. I believe Commissioner, would like to make a second?
Yeah, I'll make a formally make a second now, because I retracted the first one, so.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Commissioner Ramos, and a second by Commissioner Alderete. And Secretary, can you roll call vote?
Okay, roll call. Commissioner Alderete.
Yes.
Commissioner Calderon.
Aye.
Commissioner McLaughlin.
Aye.
Commissioner Ramos.
Aye.
Commissioner Wu.
Aye.
Vice Chair Pham.
Aye.
Chair Morrissey.
Aye.
Motion passes by unanimous consent.
Congratulations to Brandywine. Thank you very much. So that will conclude the business calendar, and we'll move on to the work study calendar. The item on the work study calendar is planning commission training, so please no action will be taken on this item. Marco Martinez will give us a presentation.
Thank you, Chair, and, we wanted to provide an opportunity as we, from time to time, training and information that will be useful to the planning commission. Tonight's presentation is by Marco Martinez. He's one of the attorneys that's working with our in-house attorney staff from the UK to provide information to the planning commission in terms of, looking at best practices and best strategies as we look at how to make land use finding determination, looking at strategies, how to, in our discussion and questions, to tease out the issues and making sure that our discussion will help to address land use type issues. At the end of the day, what we're looking for is to help the commission when you're sitting up there, and we know it's very challenging to, have understanding of how your conversation can help to reaffirm either your decision, but they're based on land use, they're based on zoning, and how to ensure that your questioning will get information that will help you to arrive at that. I think that's all over here, and Marco, if you can,
Sure.
do the presentation.
Honorable Chairman, members of the commission, thank you for giving me a chance to take up a little part of your agenda tonight I don't look at it as a presentation, I look at it more as a dialogue with all of you, because I think that works much better. But as I noted, my name is Marco Martinez, I'm a partner at the Ontario office of Best Krieger. I've been with the firm for over 21 years. That entire time, my specialty has always been land use. Before that, I spent 10 years as a planner with cities, county of Los Angeles, with HCD. 10 years doing what's going on this side of the table. So I understand a lot of what they do, and it's still the most interesting part of my job, the part that I love the most. Unfortunately, I'm now mostly a city attorney. I'm a city attorney in 2 cities, and so it takes me away from a lot of that land use work, but I still do quite a bit of planning commission work. I'm a planning commission attorney for Pomona and for Colton. And so I still get an opportunity to attend these meetings and work with folks just like you on issues that you dealt with today. As I noted, the purpose of today's presentation is to just try to get a better understanding for findings. I don't want to say that the topic tonight is just findings. Feel free to bring up anything that might be relevant to the discussion of findings. As I mentioned, I want this to be a dialogue. Feel free to interrupt with questions with the chairman's permission. I think that makes for a more worthwhile presentation, probably more entertaining for you. I don't want to be just the one here that's, you know, lecturing on and on. And we'll just kind of take this conversation, you know, where it goes, depending on your needs. So, I'm hopeful that, that by the end of the presentation, you take away from this, some tools that'll make your meetings more efficient, certainly, Ryan benefit, more comfortable in the sense that he's able to defend your decisions. But more, it's really for you. I want you to be more comfortable with the decisions that you make. I can understand that, you know, if I was making this presentation about 15 years ago, it would be a totally different presentation. Today, with all of the mandates that you have coming down from Sacramento, it's a much more difficult thing to be a planner. It is. It just is. In the old days, I could tell you that, boy, you could just kind of look at the findings that you had in your books and take a look at your general plan, and depending on, you know, and I heard a lot of you mention the general plan today. That's great. As a former planner, you love commissioners that are mentioning the general plan and general plan policies. But today, that's not enough. And so I think the expectation is, and I think the expectation that you have for your staff is to, at the same time as getting your staff reports, to educate you on some of those laws, because you're severely limited on the things that you need to. That's just the nature of housing and land use in California today. And so with that, let's kind of move forward and talk about things. So the authority to make findings, or the requirement to make findings, come from a variety of places. In many cases, it's state law that requires it. But you've got some provisions in your own municipal code. And I'll point you to section 41-639 that says that in granting or denying a variance, conditional use permit, or minor exception, the planning commission shall make written findings which shall specify all facts relied upon said commission in rendering its decision and attaching conditions and safeguards, which is a pretty standard provision in many municipal codes. The same thing applies during times where you've got to make findings because state law requires you to make findings. You probably have similar language in your subdivision ordinance, if not the Subdivision Map Act requires the exact same thing. So before you approve a subdivision, like the one you had just before, you've got to make certain specific findings, and they've got, in your code, for instance, although state law doesn't require that, but in your code, it requires them to be written. So that's a little bit different than a lot of localities might have. Yours are specifically required to be written. In most cases, you see them, they're contained in the resolution, but they don't have to be. And we'll get into a little bit about, later on, about what are the different ways in which to make findings.
The word adjudicating is a little different than the way the PUC does adjudication, where you have adjudicating judge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so adjudicating is making a judgment based on existing land use ordinance and all that. We've been guided very well by our city staff, and there was 2 instances I could think of where the finding of facts was troubling to come up with because there was nothing we could do. Well, one was in terms of proliferation of liquor stores and liquor type establishments, when we also have a social problem in terms of alcoholism in the city. The second one was can I be specific about, there was a church that wanted to come in, but we didn't feel that the church and the way they were operating were compatible with the community. So we had to come up with a finding of fact for them. But it was struggling trying to come up with a way of wording that.
Yeah. You're going to hate this answer.
Okay.
But the answer is it depends.
Okay, yeah.
Obviously, I wasn't here for those proceedings, but to adjudicate in this case means to apply facts to the law.
Okay.
And so it really depends on the number of facts that you have. What's difficult, and you're not the only commission who deals with this, what's difficult is that sometimes you run into situations where you know maybe intuitively that, boy, this application, I got a problem with it. But yet, what the staff is telling you is that
it checked all the boxes, right? Environmentally, no impacts, no mitigation measures required, all the studies came back clean, but yet intuitively, you think that there's still an issue. Those are the most difficult ones to handle. I can't tell you that I've got a perfect answer for it. I can tell you have enough to battle, because all of the weight of the evidence is probably against you. Unless you have something that's more specific, I think you're gonna have a hard time trying to come up with those findings. I think it's only natural to push back a little bit and to inquire and to probe, but ultimately, if the evidence that you're looking for to support your position isn't there, it isn't there. And you know intuitively that if you can't make it, I bet you him or John, they're gonna know intuitively, I can't defend it, which is what we're thinking of every time you sit there. So I think you wanna be careful with this.
Yeah,
Right.
and I do appreciate that they try to do the job without persuading one way or another. I never felt that we were being pushed in the direction, that they were trying to look at the best interest of the city and all that. In the end, it was just, you didn't have a good feeling there, I guess.
Yeah, I think ultimately the last line there, is the one that I would like for you to take away from this slide, which is questions and comments may be made of staff and the applicant, but within the guidelines discussed. Meaning, take a look at the findings and ask probative questions that help you determine whether or not you can make findings. Right? As we'll get into a little bit, some of those findings are very specific. They're asking you to make, to create a finding based on specific information. Some of the questions that might be asked are really irrelevant to that information. You want to be careful about this, because you can't rely on it. Nice information to have, interesting, right? Makes for an interesting meeting sometimes. But ultimately, in order to make the finding, it's kind of irrelevant. So, I don't dissuade my planning commissioners from asking those kinds of questions. It's nice, but I sort of begin, they hair on the back of my neck, they stand up when they begin to rely on what the answer to those questions, when those questions really have nothing to do with the finding. That's when I think you better be careful. So, what are the other reasons why we want to have pretty adequate findings? And here's the list. Number one, it provides the commission with a framework for making decisions while enhancing the integrity of the administrative process. In summary of that one, basically it helps you synthesize the information. Look, I heard the chairman say that you have something like 400 pages of information on one of the matters today. And so, compound that with 3 or 4 or 5 or a completely full agenda with similar items, and you've got a lot of information you got to go to. And there are cases that are tough. I realize and acknowledge that. I hate to be in your shoes sometimes. There are cases where you've got two sides, right? The developer battling and the public or the residents battling, and you're kind of caught in the middle, and everybody's bringing up some good points, and those are the toughest ones. And so I think that a focus on the findings provides commissions with a really good framework for determining when am I an A or an A. And so I think when you drown out all of the noise and you just focus on the relevant information that would help you make the findings, the decision, I think, becomes a little bit clearer, or hopefully it does. Again, it helps guide the commission's analysis and reduces the likelihood that you will randomly leap from evidence to conclusions or base your conclusions on irrelevant issues. Always take the time, even during the middle of the hearing. It's always a good idea. Take the time, okay, what do I have to find in order to approve or deny this case? Am I hearing that? And if I'm not hearing that, let's ask some questions to make sure that I am hearing that. And I think that will always serve you well. 3, it enables applicants and other parties to determine whether or not, and on what basis, they should seek judicial review or appeal the decision. Anytime you get, your decisions are appealable to the city council, I'm presuming, in most cases. And so you want to give them a basis to appeal. It helps synthesize the issues that go before city council. So we're not, in many cases, although most of those appeals are what are called novel hearings, meaning everything is up for grabs again, as
at least when the applicant is focused on a certain set of issues that, they've got an issue with, it helps synthesize that to city council. It informs the reviewing court of the basis for the commission's action, or the city council's action. And so it provides the court with really clear information on, what was the hearing like, what were the facts they considered, how did they apply the facts to the law, and what was the basis for the decision. If you can do that, I mean, you provide a really clear roadmap for the court. And when these cases get challenged, that's what the court's looking for. It's looking for that roadmap. They're not going to overturn your decision unless it's completely arbitrary. And so when a court sees that you connected the dots, it's less likely that they're going to overturn your decision. Finally, it helps to dissuade from challengers that might be looking at challenging the decision. When they see that there are legally adequate findings, that they're contained in the resolution, I mean, the first thing I do when I used to represent our clients is, okay, show me the resolution. And I look at the resolution, and if I see that the resolution contains findings, the findings contain, all of the basis upon which they were made, that's one thing. But there are also times where I saw resolutions that basically just, we'll get into this a little bit, that just recites the actual finding without any support for it. Well, that's easy. I know they make findings. I know they adopted the boilerplate resolution that somebody put together probably 10 years ago, and they never really updated it. Those are the easy ones to change. So you want to make sure that information is contained both on the record and in the writing, because it helps dissuade people like me and others to challenge your decision. At its most basic, findings are really a way for you to show your work. Right? That's all it is. So when are findings required? Well, we mentioned a little while ago that your code requires findings for certain land use cases. Other times, the requirements are contained in state law. So, for example, the Subdivision Map Act has a number of findings that have to be made before you approve a tentative map. In other cases, the findings have been created by court cases. There's a few of those that over the years have evolved and now are contained as actual findings in many of your land use decisions. For example, even though there may be a requirement in your local code regarding a finding that talks about consistency with the general plan, that's a court-required finding anyway. So that's always going to be in there. So the first step in understanding legal requirements is to understand what are those legal requirements, what is the law requiring you to do. And it's always good practice to make findings in every land use decision. In most cases, that's going to be the case anyway, but there's a few where that wasn't always the case. What is more difficult is trying to keep up with the findings that are now required by all the state mandates, right? I just pulled one up because we were talking about it today, but I imagine the letter you got was an SB 330 letter right before the hearing. Yeah, we're all getting it. And they're all saying the same thing, and they're right. It says that before you can disapprove a housing development, you must find that the project would have a specific adverse impact upon the public health or safety unless the project is disapproved or approved upon the condition that the project be developed at a lower density. And then state law describes a specific adverse impact. It means a significant, quantifiable, direct, and unavoidable impact based on objective, identified, written public health or safety standards, policies, or conditions as they existed on the date the application was deemed complete. Well, guess what? You've all seen your general plan. There's no such policy like that in general plan. I can almost bet my bottom dollar there's no such policy, right? Your general plan says things like the city should endeavor to, or the city should make an effort to, or, a lot of these sort of, I don't want to say they're wishy-washy, they're relevant, but they're not specific and quantifiable They're not in specific or quantifiable language, which means you can't rely on them as a basis to deny the project based on this law. And so that's what you're facing, right?
So an example of that would be is that if we specifically had gone out and commissioned our own air quality study at every corridor along different corridors of our city and have sampling and model that, we could use that evidence to say we require more 17 instead of 13. Hard factual evidence that's been supported, and that's what we would be able to use to support the additional requirement.
The other thing this law does is it turns the burden of proof over a bit. In most cases, you're required to show by substantial evidence that the finding you made is accurate. Here, the standards could change to preponderance of the evidence, which is a much higher standard. And so it is really tough nowadays, as opposed to 5, 10, 15 years ago, to suddenly make a finding on a housing project that you think intuitively, it's going to have some impact. I don't know what they are, but I think I'm just gonna go to deny it. You just can't do that anymore without being much more specific about what is it about the project. And I'll tell you right now, it's extremely difficult, and that's because you've got something already on the books that you can rely, because you're not going to be able to rely on the sort of generic policies of the general planning. That just isn't going to happen. So I think going into a discussion about a project, I think you have to know that. And that doesn't mean that you still can't ask probing questions, and, solicit information that you've got an interest in. That's all fine and good, but just remember, it's all nice information, but I'm not going to be able to use it, at least to deny the project. You might be able to use it to approve the project, but certainly not to deny it. So, yes.
Kind of in the scenario that we're discussing right now. So then why do these projects come before the commission if, if there was no negative findings that found that recommend approval, and really there can be very little chance the commission on the spot will be able to find substantive findings, then why isn't this an administrative approval rather than why does it come to the commission then?
That's a great question. I think if the state had its way, it would do that. It would certainly tell planning departments across California, change all these to ministerial approvals, and life would be a heck of a lot easier.
In many ways it has.
Yeah, they were trying.
Yeah, in many ways they have. However, the counter to that is that there is a public benefit in being transparent. As long as you tell folks, I think, look, here's what the project is, but understand that unless we have these laws already on the books and they're specific, identified, quantifiable, according to the definition, we're not going to be able to deny it. But I think there's still a benefit to having the people have their say, because sometimes they're going to bring up issues. What the law says in that case for the SB 30 project, you can't impose a condition or make a project that makes it infeasible. Adopted conditions today, they didn't make anything infeasible. You just said it's worthwhile to take another look. There's a benefit to that, right? But I hear you, because it reminds me of the old days where when the state first got involved in regulating childcare, daycare homes, home daycare, and they said that, well, if it's 0 to 6 children, it's ministerial, you can't do anything, but between 6 to 12, you can't deny it, but you can have a hearing. And so we used to have these CUPs for 12 kid daycares, and people used to come unglued, and we had to sit down, sorry, we can't deny it, but we're just letting you know that it's about to happen next door to you. Yeah, it creates a tough situation, and I admit, and it's happened to me, I admit that sometimes the political pressure on commissions and councils is great in those situations, where it's hard to tell people, sorry, there's nothing we can do. I just had a city that that faced that kind of, I'll tell you, because there's a settlement agreement on the books now, because we settled it, but they denied a housing project. The allegations, they didn't make the findings that were required by the law, got sued. In the middle of the lawsuit, ATD conducted an investigation, found the same thing. They were about to refer the matter over to the Attorney General for their own lawsuit. Had the city lost those lawsuits, they would have faced monetary penalties of $10,000 per unit, which on this housing project would have been about $800,000. So ultimately, as part of the settlement agreement, the city council had to reverse that decision. So when I tell them today, it's like, look, you could either just bite the bullet and approve it today, or we're going to be back here in 3 months after we have a settlement agreement, where you're going to have to reverse your decision, right? And that's going to look even worse. So I figure out a way to let the public know that, look, I mean, the people you got probably complained to is Sacramento, and not here. And it's unfortunate that that's just the way that things are today. Ultimately, it still costs the city money, even to do the settlement, because we still had to settle on the attorney's fees for the other side. We had to spend our own attorney's fees to work with ATD and drafting the investigation, and so it still costs money. But it certainly didn't cost the over $1 million we were anticipating by digging in our heels. So that is the, that's the stick approach, right? That, and what's funny, I had to make that present. We did the settlement agreement in public. Normally settlement agreements are done in closed session. We did this one in public because obviously the city would have gotten killed if we done it. So I had to be part of the presentation to tell the public, here's what we're doing and here's why we're doing it. And we still had a throng of people out there coming out, because obviously at that time I didn't know that the settlement agreement was about to be announced. And the very first speaker came up and said, after listening to that presentation and the presentation of the city attorney, I understand why you have to do this. I don't agree with it, but I understand. Sometimes that's all you need to get, is understanding. So what are findings required, in addition to the time limit required by code? In most cases, it's what they're required when you're having quasi-judicial or adjudicatory proceedings, meaning there's a fixed rule or standard of law that applies to a specific parcel of land, like a variance, for example. Other discretionary permits, you can reviews, subdivisions, etc. And again, when they're required, stick to them. Queries and comments, it should be findings-based, because they assist you in making those tough decisions. I'm not saying they can't bring up other issues. I'm just saying that ultimately, for everybody on this side of the table, it's kind of irrelevant. Nice information, maybe it helps you politically, maybe it helps you practically, maybe it helps you for some other reasons, but for everybody on this side of the table, it's just nice information to have. But if it's unrelated to findings, down. Next slide, please. When are findings not required? When you're performing a legislative role. And in most cases, the planning commission is not performing a legislative role. In most cases, when there's a legislative application, you're merely making a recommendation to the council in their legislative role. But in those cases, you're not required to adopt findings. Although, in some cases, even for those, there's at least a general plan consistency finding that we might have to make. We had a 6542 finding today. It's kind of similar to that. And so, situations where you've got general plan amendment, zone change, specific plan, there's nothing that says you have to, like, for example, when you actually have the ability to deny a project of some kind, you typically will make findings in the negative, right? This project does not meet, whatever that finding is. With a legislative act like that, no finding you have to make, you say no. In fact, in some cases, it probably speaks to your detriment to say more than just no on a legislative act.
So what are the tips that we suggest for making findings? I mentioned this one earlier. Findings must be substantive and cannot just recite the law. Courts have held that findings are not sufficient if they merely recite the language of the statute. The language, the written finding that you make should explain why you made the finding, the because element. For example, in the old days, we used to see on the general plan consistency finding, in the old days, you see a finding that says the proposed development is consistent with the city's general plan. That's it. That was the finding. Today, obviously, you see the proposed development is consistent with the city's general plan because the project proposes a multi-family, 80-unit project. The site is located within the general plan, land use, residential category, land use element is zoned R3. The project complies with the city's density. I mean, you see a lot more information, obviously, and that is really what you should do. But in the old days, you used to see a lot of that, where cities would just make a generic finding that just recited this finding.
How do you change the law? Is that a city council function?
Yes.
Okay, if that's a city council function, what is our function? Can we recommend that they do a study on, do we have enough liquor stores or?
That's a great question. And different cities take a different approach, right? On a large city like this, I would imagine that you probably have work plans and you kind of have your yearly project list already approved. And I can tell you that I have clients where the planning staff is telling me, boy, the last thing we want is to the commission start discussing all kinds of stuff that isn't even on the work plan, because we can't do it anyway. And so then the answer is, well, how do you get it on the work plan? Well, simply having a discussion. I mean, you could agendize that every meeting till the end of the year about what you want to work on. Doesn't mean it's going to get done. I would suggest, the suggestion that I make is in a larger city like this, I would imagine you're appointed by districts, right? Contact your council members. Let them bring it up. If it's such a big deal, right, if it's such a big, huge issue, that's probably where I'd start.
The staff is pretty proactive in having
Sure.
a community meeting.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I think there's some issue where I think the residents are not in as good as a position as sometimes businesses or other entities that, come in conflict with what our desirability in the general plan and the housing plan. And I think that that's the time when I do see that public comes out to comment, right? But in the end of the day, based on all the checklists that we do, you don't feel good. You have to kind of go with a good checklist itself.
So I can say that the way that we historically have addressed changes, as you would say, they're generated from a number of sources, either federal or state change in terms of regulation, and we have to react to it. It could be resident and community-based, community-based issue that gets brought up to the decision makers and leadership, and that gets, provided to us as direction. It could be planning commission generated also through the same process where you hear about issues, you provide feedback to staff, and we again make recommendations to the city council, or a staff initiated to where we see issues and we bring it forth to you. So those are generally the four areas on sources of initiatives, catalysts to change, so that we will bring it forward. There are laws that we can change; those are locally based. That is in our municipal code on local issues. However, with state law and federal law, we cannot make those changes unless we go through the process of advocating for those changes through our representatives. So local law, we can certainly make changes, and how we should do that is residence-based, community-based, county-based, planning commission-based, or staff-based.
And that's the approach I think that's taken everywhere, is everyone's just trying to catch up with the changes that are required by state law, right? Recently, you had ADUs, SB 9, SB 30, pre-application, they're just trying to catch up. And so, and I have another commission that, well, we really gotta change the design guidelines. We really gotta change the design guidelines. And they're frustrated that the staff isn't bringing forward a change in design guidelines. And, in talking to them, I mean, they talk to me, how come we can't direct staff to do that? You don't control the money, that's why. It costs money to change design guidelines. They're trying to keep up with just those changes in state law. They know what the work plan is. And if they get, I'm sure they've heard, because this commission is not the only commissioner that brings up the fact that we gotta change the design guidelines. So the next time they have a chance to fit it into the work plan, they're gonna do that because it's not the only time they put that time. But is it a priority? No. I think you're just gonna have to live with it. I guess it's gonna become a priority.
And we do have work plans, we just recently adopted the general plan, and through the general plan process, there are a number of policies and implementation actions that we have to follow up on. So we have a good 5 to 10 years of work ahead of us, just in the updating of the zoning code alone, which is going to be the next 7 years. So that's our pure priority.
And they're no different. They're no different. Everyone's in the same boat. And so, you know, I tell the commissioner that really just doesn't like those design guidelines. Yes. And, you know, at some point, if there's an issue that blows up at city council, you can bet those design guidelines are gonna be a priority. But until then, you know, it's just gonna have to wait to get on board. Next slide, please. Findings may not be formal, but formal findings are good policy. But in your case, findings are a bit more formal because they're required to be written. But there are other cities that don't require written findings, and so in those cases, we can, or they can adopt findings that can contain the staff report. But just know that the debates and oral remarks and hearings are not sufficient to meet the findings requirements. We'll get into a little bit of discussion of ex parte communications, meaning communications held outside of the hearing context. In those cases, if that information is public, you can't rely on it. If it's a really important issue, you can't rely. If just before the hearing, you got on your phone and you looked up something that you thought was relevant to the issue, was relevant to the findings, if you didn't mention it, it doesn't exist. And so I always caution people, caution commissioners that, look, you know, if you're using your phone, especially during a meeting, and if you're relying on that information, that whatever information is getting on that phone, you don't do it or bring it up. Let everybody have the benefit, whatever it is, whatever research you're doing, let everybody have the benefit. Because it also brings up a separate issue, which is sort of a transparency issue and the issue of the public perceiving that the decision was made based on everything that occurs during the meetings, and not leaving this room with the perception that, you know, Commissioner so-and-so voted right before he looked at their phone. Are we getting direction from somebody? Is it a council member? Is it, you know, I get that all the time. There's a council member so-and-so is texting me. How do you do it? No. So I will have a conversation with Commissioner so-and-so. It's like, there's no text going on between you and the council member, right? Because the council member usually sits his back. And so, no. I said, okay, well, try not to do that because it just kind of looks bad. So you want to be careful about those situations, right? But if it is a situation where you are getting information, you're gonna have to disclose it, otherwise it can't be used. Right? That's right. So, we covered, that they don't need to be formal, and you guys did a pretty good job on your motion. So, the only thing that I would suggest is, that you, in your motion, in addition to saying that, you know, I like to make a motion to approve based on staff's recommendation, I would just mention based on the findings contained in the draft resolution, and staff's recommendation, and the conditions of approval. And then you can talk about how you revise conditions. So that is a more formal way of doing it, but I'll tell you, when these things get challenged in court, that always becomes it avoids having to draft a page and a half convincing a judge that it actually happened. Whereas, you know, the minutes are there, the motion is there, it's in there. Of course, they adopted it pursuant to the findings. And so we don't waste 2 or 3 pages trying to convince the judge of all the things that actually happened. This is just a much easier way of doing it. So I encourage you to do that. Well, separate, aside from that, if I could make one other suggestion, and that is, especially when you amend conditions in the middle of a hearing, is get the, I don't know what that happens, but get the applicant to come back and concur. So all you do is you make a motion, you amended it. If there's no amendments, you just ask them while they're up here doing their presentation. But if there have been amendments, you get them back up here and say, you heard the condition, are you okay with the revision? Yes, I am. The reason is that there is some body of case law that says that if an applicant formally agrees to the conditions of approval, and then relies and takes advantage of the permit, they can't come back later on and object to the condition. Even in some cases when it's an unconstitutional condition. And so that only comes into play when you have an affirmative, yes, I understand, yes, I agree to that. Because that's your chance to object and you can do it. And so if I can make that one suggestion in your cases, especially when you're amending conditions, bring that up. Okay, you heard the motion, are you okay with the conditions? Most cases they're going to say yes. You know what, if they say no, then you know what, let's hash it out. I'd rather hash it out now than getting an appeal that's going to take another month and requiring the staff report and go to the city council. Even if it means taking a continuance to hash it out. I think I prefer that happen here. So, but what I want to leave here is that questions are great. They make for a great record. They make for an even better record when the questions are related to the actual findings. Findings must be set forth clearly and cannot be vague or ambiguous. What this slide is getting to is that we know what the findings are, because those are contained in your laws, both in local laws and state laws. But sometimes the information that gets put as justification for the finding has nothing to do with the finding. I see this a lot with variances. So I'm sure you're no different. Variances say that there's got to be something special about the size, shape, topography of the land that warrants granting the deviation from the development standard. And sometimes you'll get findings like, well, the finding is needed because it causes an undue financial hardship. Financial hardship isn't one of the findings. It might cause a financial hardship, but that's not one of the findings. So it's kind of irrelevant. So you want to make sure that they're clear and that they're not vague, and that they relate to the actual finding. I see that a lot with, for example, sometimes commissions are charged with making the ABC
For the
overconcentration.
public convenience and
overconcentrated
necessity?
Yeah. Sometimes you see a lot on those, where the finding is made as well, this is really needed, and, the applicant has been a good citizen for the last 20 years, and great information, but it's just completely irrelevant.
Tonight, were we quibbling over numbers? Like, staff, when they review, submit or exceeded, the laws and regulations, we want one more, or whatever. And it's not just tonight's thing, I mean, I find myself doing it, I think we all done it at one point, that we're looking at the quality more, and then over there keep focusing on facts, and going back to the finding, and does it meet this, does it meet that, and all that. So that's my question, are we're quibbling over quality and other issues that are not tangible facts?
Well,
Findings?
I think, I give you an easy answer, it depends. Certainly on a housing project, I hit the nail on the head. Look, if you want to change the standard, but you can't hold this out. Well, I'm not going to let you do that, because they made their application, 30, 60, 90 days ago, and the city had 30 or 60 days to tell them that you don't comply with whatever, and if all we did is give them a complete letter, that's it. They're presumed to be consistent with everything. And so you heard the finding that's required to deny the project, and nothing, there's no specific adverse health and safety standard that you can rely on simply because you wanted an extra unit. There just isn't. It's nice to put it out there, maybe it plants a seed in the developer's ear, but ultimately, it met the requirements. And in most cases, that's what happens, right? Because the requirements are what's been set 30, 60, 90 days ago. And obviously, if it didn't meet the requirements, they would have prepared a letter saying it doesn't meet the requirements, and it wouldn't be before you. But the fact that it's before you already tells you it met the requirements, and if we didn't tell them it didn't, we presume that it's met the minimum requirement that we can't deny it. So if you want to, ask for, I think the approach that you took back is great, and it's about the best you can do. But if you wanted to change that to say, we're going to have an upgraded requirement for everybody to provide upgraded air filtration, change the standard.
And I guess where I'm coming from just observing our behavior as a group and individually, it seems that our knowledge of the community and also hearing the voice of the community come up during times when decisions being made, and we're trying to also reflect what that says, but then what I'm hearing you say is educated. And very much.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm always right. I had I'm going to count all this, but I had a professor in urban planning who used to tell us that once you become professional planners, I better not see any of you on planning commissions. Because we're completely biased, right? We're really into the little details. The people that are on planning commissions are people like you. Different professions, members of the community, you bring a different perspective. We can guide you and in some cases teach you about some of these legal requirements you got to follow, but ultimately it's more important to have that other perspective that they don't have, that I don't have, that you bring to the table. Because that's what's going to make better decisions. And so I don't want you to shy away from stuff like that. I just want you to have the understanding that, look, you might want to bring it up, and that's great. You might plant a seed in their ear, but ultimately, legally, we're not going to do it, right? Either because we've got legal constraints, or we've got financial constraints, or we've got political or practical constraints. You just have to understand that's part of the game. Right? It just is. And you're no different. You're no different. Because those same constraints occur everywhere. Now, can they be overcome? Sure. I've seen them overcome, but they're just as likely to
kind of put a roadblock in it, and I just don't want you to be frustrated by that. Yeah, because you provide valuable service, and it's a service that nobody else can do. Excellent. Commissions and councils are free to use the findings prepared by staff, but that doesn't mean you always have to use them. Sometimes their focus on a finding is completely different than your focus on a finding. That's sort of why. And so it's okay to amend the finding. I mean, you amend conditions all the time, but I like to tell commissions that you can amend findings too. Maybe they don't reflect the real reason why you want to approve a project. It's okay to amend it. Sure they won't get hurt, because it happens all the time. It used to happen to me all the time. But again, it's not just, I mean, I always see commissions amend conditions of approval, but you can amend the findings too. And I always tell people, make use of the recitals. There are times where, I'll give you an example. I once had a general plan amendment. I think it was a whole element. But it was an amendment. But I only had 3 planning commissioners because the other 2 were conflicted out, because they were too close to whatever this area of the project was. So under the law, I had to have all 3 of them vote yes. And I had one that just had an issue with one part of the amendment. Like, I'm okay with, it's just this one part I just can't agree with. And so he was really torn. And the rest of us are looking at it like, boy, if he votes no, this whole thing goes from a 2. We don't get a positive recommendation, that's gonna look horrible, when he gets to city council. It was voted down by the planning commission because it didn't have sufficient votes. That's just gonna look really bad. And so what eventually we settled on is, and I asked the commission, I said, look, if it really just this one issue, what you could do is simply ask whoever makes the motion to include a recital that says that you're in favor of the whole thing, but you have an issue here, and explain what your concern is. Because ultimately, it's a recommendation to City Council. City Council is going to see that resolution. They're going to see if the issue is you want the council to see your concern, your objection, might as well just put it in the resolution. He puts it in the resolution, but he votes yes. But it reflected his concern. He got to, he let the council know, I have a concern here. I think it ought to be, and I think the issue was a separation requirement. He thought it ought to be 1,000 as opposed to 500, but he didn't want to kill the whole amendment. And so I always thought, well, that's really a good way to handle that. So feel free to add, right, in the recitals that whenever you've got a particular issue that, I mean, if you want to vote no, but if, for the most part, everything that is going on is fine with you, you use the recital as a means to waste your opinion about things. But again, what I want you to take out of the slide is not just amendment of conditions, you can also amend the resolution of the findings. Always recommend that we want to add findings to justify unusual conditions of approval. I mean, the ones that are not the boilerplate ones. So for example, let's assume you add a dedication requirement, that wasn't included originally. I think we want to add a finding that explains the basis for that to help protect you in case there's a challenge on that one finding, because it is unusual. It does go outside of the boilerplate. So you want to make sure that you at least discuss that and make up your own finding. Nothing says that you can have more findings, so you can certainly add a finding that says that the conditions for approval are relevant, specifically the condition relating to the dedication of land, because, and then you explain it. So it'll go a long way towards helping to protect that property in case there's a fair challenge. But again, you have to be careful about some of those in that, and this is a whole separate presentation about the power and authority, to impose conditions. Remember that, whenever you're dealing with a condition approval, it's gotta be reasonably related to the impacts created by the project. So they just can't be, coming out of thin air just because you like it. It's gotta be related to the impacts that's created by the project. They are within, your authority, but again, it's gotta be related to the decision. And you probably know this, if we had to break down the types of conditions that you impose, there's generally two types. There's regulatory conditions, conditions that regulate or restrict the permitted uses of the property, and there's exactions. There's conditions that divest the applicant of property or money. So we talked today about a condition of approval related to the payment of some equipment fees or something, park development fees. So that's an exaction. But a condition to regulate or restrict the permitted use of the property, that, the live work unit, the work part can only be used for work, that's a regulatory condition. Again, they both must be reasonably related to the impacts created by the project. So the findings should relate to the language contained in the finding, meaning in the law that provides the finding. So for example, your section 41-638 lists the type of finding that's required for a CUP. And so at minimum, it must contain this finding. It doesn't mean you can't add more, but at a minimum, it must contain this one. And so you don't want to stray too far from this language. You want to make sure that the questions you ask are relevant to this finding, to help you make the finding, to solicit information about the project that will help you make the finding. And so while other components of the project might be important, this is really one that matters, or important to you. So, and I see this quite a bit. We've got the listed findings, and I had this at a CUP a couple of months ago for alcohol, where the commission was considering imposing certain conditions related to the operation of a restaurant that was going to sell beer and wine. And the findings for a beer and wine license were standard for a CUP. But ultimately, they decided not to impose this particular condition because they thought the applicant had constructed other similar projects, had operated other restaurants in other cities that they knew about, including the adjacent city, and that he knew what he was doing, and so there was no need. And while that's a perfectly legitimate way to look at this application, the converse to that is that you've got to remember that in many cases, these applications run with land. They have nothing to do with the applicant. And so while this applicant, you trust, will comply with all the conditions of approval and will operate in a way that is beneficial to the community, that doesn't mean he's going to turn around next month and sell it to somebody else who's not. And so your opportunity to condition that project to make sure that whatever impacts you were worried about aren't going to happen is gone. Now you're going to have to wait until there's actual impacts that are created by this new operator, and then you bring them back to a review or a possible revocation, and then that's when you go to the condition. But I think it helps to think about it helps to think about the fact that these applications in most cases run with the land, and you want to be looking at them generically as running with the land. So when you look at the findings, think of it that way. Next slide. Where do you get findings? Certainly staff reports, written and oral testimony, the environmental documents, exhibits, the resolution, transcripts of the hearing. But obviously the most, the typical way of getting is in the staff report and the resolution.
And in some cases, you'll get, findings from some of the testimony. I've prepared findings that have come back that are based entirely on the observations of a neighbor, you know, to support a particular condition, for example. And so in the finding that we talk about the unusual condition as far as the justification, we state, well, pursuant to the testimony of Mr. So-and-so, you know, we're closing this finding. And here was his testimony, and that's, and the finding, and the condition is needed because, and so we explain. So it's perfectly legitimate to rely on the, especially people who have firsthand knowledge of the project or the situation. Next slide, please. Unacceptable sources. Transcripts of the meeting debate, boilerplate findings we talked about, undisclosed ex parte communications, opinions that are purely personal and not supported by facts, conjecture, speculation, prior history of the applicant regarding matters before the planning commission, all probably unacceptable, kind of irrelevant. So you want to watch out for those. And so let's talk about a little bit about ex parte communications. An ex parte communication is a communication subject who's pending in an adjudicatory quasi-judicial proceeding, like CUP or variance. They raise due process and fair hearing concerns because the decision, as you all know, has to be based on information presented to all parties, and the public is included in all that. And so, it's got to be based on information and material contained in the record, i.e. that information received as part of the public hearing. So the letter that you received today that's in the record happened during the public hearing. So if somebody wanted to allege that you violated SB 330, and if you defended because, well, we didn't know what SB 330 was, well, that's evidence that you should have known because we sent you a letter. So that's all information that came in during the record. And so that's the danger with ex parte communications. It's a fair hearing issue, a transparency issue, that the public needs to know that the decisions that you're making are based on the information that's before you and not an information that's not, that you're not having dinner with the applicants, you know, a week before the hearing and kind of hashing all this stuff out, that the decision is actually based on what you're hearing today. That's not to say that meetings with the applicant or meetings with the public don't happen. They do. Next slide, please. What I'm saying is that if they do happen, they should be disclosed along with a summary of the nature of the discussion. You should engage in a statement that indicates that you visited the site or you met with the applicant and you made your own investigation, and you should indicate what it is that you found relevant about that meeting or that visit. Again, the final determination, the final decision has to be based on information presented to everyone. So if you're going to rely on it, it's beneficial to have all your commissioners rely on it. It might be that important. So it's not saying that it shouldn't happen. It just means you've got to disclose it. So whether it occurs in an off-site visit, in a newspaper article, in a text message you got to disclose it. And it's even worse today is that some of your disclosures, your text messages are now subject to Public Records Act requests. So if I could make a suggestion to you, I wouldn't use this at all to conduct any business anymore. Not like the old days. I keep everything open. I always get asked, well, should I meet with the applicant or shouldn't I? And my answer is always well. An applicant has a First Amendment right to ask to meet with you. But different commissioners take a different approach, right? Some commissioners will say, you know what, give me whatever you got in writing, and then I'll give it to everybody else, and everybody else will benefit. Others will say, sure, I'll meet with you and disclose it as part of the record. That's a little trickier. Others will say, sure, I'll meet with you, but I want a staff member with me. And you know, if you have a site visit, you bring the staff member, that way it's a witness and everybody sees the same information. Maybe they get the same information that might be relevant to their, because they're thinking about what recommendations to make. That's the other way.
So there's various ways to handle it. Others say, absolutely not, I'm not meeting you, and I don't want to meet with you. I'll hear it all during public hearing. That's perfectly legitimate too. They have a right to contact you, but they don't have a right to meet with you. Different ways to handle it.
I have a question. So our bylaws reference filing an ex parte form with either the executive director or the city attorney. With the standard form we have.
Yeah, and some cities, and I don't know if the disclosures that you make are financial disclosures or ex parte disclosures, I couldn't tell.
So, as part of every meeting, the commissioners will provide an explanation, disclosure in terms of the meeting, but also as part of the process of onboarding, we provide information. To understand that any ex parte communication will have. So basically, it's an affidavit, that's provided that's provided so that they acknowledge that they have been discussed, and understand.
In one of my other cities, it's not an ex parte disclosure, it's a financial disclosure. They disclose whether they received any gifts, totaling $50 or more from any applicant the night before. So it's a different purpose for it, but it's a similar disclosure that occurs before the hearing.
Before COVID, there used to be more events, cocktail parties, you go to a chamber event, you're out and about in the community, go to community meetings, and all that. And you might hear something or someone tells you something, if you get approached by a developer, but you don't know that that's going to be on the docket here, okay? But it becomes available. So we should disclose that. I remember 6 months ago or 2 years ago, I was at a cocktail party and this developer talked to me about the project they may be doing, and here it is. Right?
No, that would be appropriate. I mean, the other way to do it is to bring the developer up and say, developer, do you recall 6 years ago or 5 years ago or whatever, 2 years ago, we had a discussion about, and then you kind of walk them through and then let them tell everybody right now.
Yeah, sometimes it's
So
it's very general discussion.
So the conversation isn't specifically with you, but you heard some information. You don't necessarily, and you're not involved in questioning or discussion or actively, you don't have to disclose that. These are direct communications where you are involved, you're asking questions. And as many of you have asked me in the past, I have advised you, yes, you can use the applicant, do not necessarily make a decision or have any line of questioning that would bring that to that. You can ask clarifying questions, but my advice is just to listen. You don't even ask questions, but if you do, just ask a clarifying question. Nothing that would indicate, go one way or the other. So we don't discourage you, but when you do get asked, that's what we do share with you. I know I've spoken to you in the past as well, and hopefully my guidance has provided you with some clarity.
Yeah, it's tough not to hear it because working in the community development and affordable housing field, you're always meeting with bankers or developers or this and all that, but you don't connect it because sometimes it's just cocktail chatter.
But my follow-up is that when we file an ex parte, what part of disclosure during the planning commission meeting that we file something, or do we disclose?
No, basically disclose like you always do before meetings that today, or I met with the applicant, or sometimes the applicant contacted me, or I visited the site. So those are the appropriate type of disclosure that you would provide about a project.
If that's all that happened,
Yeah.
then I think the disclosures that you make in this forum are appropriate. If you're going to be relying on information that you heard during that meeting to make your decision, I think that disclosure's got to be made as part of the public hearing.
We were required to have letter. I still do written. So we have an ex-party form that you can get online, and if I've done it in a while, because I haven't meet with the member of the community or the developer, I detail in that disclosure what I did. Yeah, probably only, it was because we had a commissioner that was possibly getting information that wasn't provided to anyone else.
No, I think the good rule of thumb is, even if you file a written disclosure, maybe you know. I met with the developer on the site, he generally gave me a tour, the tour engaging, it looks exactly like it does in the site plan. Or, I did notice, however, that, and then you start talking about some specific aspect that kind of intrigues you and may be relevant to the decision. That way, everyone's got the same basis of information.
So the purpose is ex parte, you're both filing ex parte and mentioning it at the plan commission, it's just you have a written documentation.
Right. And for mentioning it at the commission meetings, that you put it out in the open. Public is assured that, look, there's no secret meetings going on, we disclosed it, it's not secret. If that's always the difficult thing, is try to combat that, you know, I saw Commissioner so-and-so out there last week, what are they talking about? And now he's here voting, and that looks kind of odd to me. It would look kind of odd to me, but if you preempt that and say, I still next year, I'm putting that on the record, I already did, beginning hearing. And I do suggest you do it at the beginning, right, not when somebody calls you on it. Again, the final determination has to be based on evidence presented at the hearing, and to which all the affected parties had an opportunity to respond, because maybe someone got a vote with that. So if you don't put it out there until the end, after all the public comment is over, there can be no vote, so it's kind of useless at that point. If I could sum up the entire presentation, it's in the word because. And that is probably the most important word that you could use in making your findings, is just explaining the because. So with that, I thank you for your time. I hope it's been beneficial. I tend to get a little too open with some of these things, but again, I've been doing this for a number of years, and I'm just telling you what it is.
Yeah, I appreciate you being with us tonight and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you, Marco, and, you know, as I mentioned, our goal with the presentation is to help the commission, because we understand it's very challenging to, the issues that we were addressing, the many concerns that we hear, that it's hard to distill what's relevant, and at the end of the day, we still have to make sure that our determination and our conditions have a practical and legal nexus to the project and impact. So, you know, hopefully this will help you provide that guidance. It is not meant to tell you that you can't, you know, discuss community issues. You can't, but at the end of the day, when you do make findings, when you do add conditions, make sure that those are solidly backed by, you know, good substantiated facts. That's really my goal, and hope this was helpful. You know, we continue to learn. I have to say that after doing this 30 years, there's still a lot of situations that we face at meetings that oftentimes, you know, are challenging because we're constantly evolving. So we'll continue to learn, and I'll commit that I'll continue to bring these type of work study sessions.
Marcos, you talked about your planning professor. My planning professor was the guy from your Swanson, who was the redevelopment director here in Miami. His thing was like, screw the city council, screw the developers, screw the community, just look good and move on to the next city. and we seem to have come a long way from there to a more professional planning.
Thank you. If there are there any other questions for?
Are we gonna get a copy of the?
Yeah, yes, we'll get you a copy of the presentation.
Yeah, if you have any questions, just feel free to reach out.
All right, thank you very much. So, that concludes the work study calendar. We'll move on to comments. Are there any staff member comments?
We have no comment.
And we'll go to planning commissioner comments. Mr. Commissioner Wu, do you have any comments?
I want to thank you for the presentation. It was helpful. It kind of cleared up some
Commissioner Ramos.
I just like, I think for the presentation, and thank you staff for being creative with it, for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Already.
No comment.
Mr. Colorado.
Really, Marco, thanks so much for the presentation, very helpful, staff as well, and, commissioners, great dialogue. The only thing I'm just gonna ask, I have to say this, is there any possible way we can get like refreshments or something during like these long meetings? Because identify, dealing with people, social worker problems, is just a lot, it's very heavy, you know, it's like I need some fuel, and I'm pretty sure most commissioners, I hope.
Okay,
You know, I mean, if that's possible, that'd be great, I'd really appreciate it.
And we'll work on that.
Yeah, and the go to the restroom too. That's all I gotta say, but other than that, thank you everyone.
Or getting back into
Thanks for that. Commissioner Waddle, do you have any comments?
No, other than thanks for the presentation, it was helpful and good information, and that's it.
I sure can.
But thank you for the presentation. That's very helpful.
Thank you. So, I do have a couple items on my list here. I was making notes today. So, I've seen a kind of a recurring theme. One is with our parking standards. So, I was wondering if we could put together a presentation and take a look at those now that we've had a few projects constructed, that we kind of see how those are working out, and if we want to tweak those.
So you're looking at, evaluating our current standards and how they compare to what's practical in terms of our community?
Yes. So obviously that would be done in, you know, kind of dovetail that with state requirements and, you know, see what opportunity we have there to kind of rectify some of the issues we hear coming up.
Absolutely, and as part of the upcoming work that we're doing, we are looking at comprehensively updating the zoning code in our standards and design based on the general plan. We could do it as part of that and make that a point of discussion as we develop our regulations, and our standards. But the commission is looking for how we have implemented parking just, you know, in terms of projects, we can provide that. But any type of real analysis is gonna require us to essentially go out, you know, hire a consultant, do the work, and do the parking analysis. So I think what we can do is provide you with, a summary presentation of information on past projects that, you know, have been approved and what kind of parking standards have, you know, been provided and how it was implemented. And then, you know, as part of the update of the code, certainly we should talk about parking. I think going back to the state and housing, we've been very much limited by the state on, especially with higher density housing and when it's located near what the state call high quality transit area, that parking is something that continues to be reduced and taken away from the city, as whereas we locally experience a whole different experience, right? Where we find that in our single family neighborhood, in our residential neighborhood, in our commercial area, that we have parking impact. So our experience here doesn't match up with what the state regulation is, and it's not us. Many communities experience the same problem. I think, you know, the state, from my perspective, have a very disillusioned view of parking. It's really looking from a perspective where if all the, I would say, the star lines, right, you have good transit, you have high density urban living, you have really good quality access to transit, right? You have regulations that are not automobile friendly. You have, you know, cheap alternatives for different modes of transportation. Those things all need to come together in order for you to really benefit from a reduced parking rate. While we're practicing some of that, we don't have all of those things in place. So
And we're landlocked, and a lot.
Right. But we're putting it in place, we have a streetcar, we're working on transit, we're ensuring that we have a job housing balance to where we provide jobs closer to where people live. We have mixed-use development project in downtown and other areas where, you know, the encouragement is that you don't, you know, run out and get in your car and go to the grocery store, but you can get all of that within a walking distance. So until those things occur, we're at a stage where none of it makes sense. You know, the commission's gonna look at staff in a way that, are you guys seeing the same thing that we're seeing? Of course we are. But we also are having to deal with state regulations, state mandates. All we can tell you that we get you, we feel your pain, but there are things that we can do, and we exercise that very deliberately, but there are things that we are basically set by the state. Good try. You know? So we will continue to do that. I commit to you that we will make that a part of our discussion when we do the zoning code update. We will provide you with, you know, just interim, how some of our recent projects measure up in terms of parking that's been constructed, and, you know, provide that information as.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, well,
Sure.
since we're on crazy bills, I don't know the number, but the bill is currently allowing people to set up these makeshift restaurants on the streets.
Yes,
I mean,
they come from LA.
I don't care.
Well, it started there, but, it's basically, sidewalk vending.
Sidewalk vending, and it's supposed to be entrepreneurship.
It's gonna get worse, actually.
But they barbecue.
It's worse already, I mean.
Well, there are actually two other bills that, are being anticipated that essentially even further restrict what a city can do to regulate sidewalk vending. Essentially, you know, reducing some of the health requirements and issues like that. So it's getting more relaxed, it's not getting more stricter.
But the COVID, we're gonna have sidewalk vending, if the health, I can control the health, I mean.
But they're operating a outdoor barbecue with charcoal in front of the junior high school, next to a bus stop,
Mendes,
off Bristol.
Bristol and Mendes. I mean, can we understand what the bill is about?
Certainly.
I mean, it impacts.
Certainly, what I can do is actually, you know, that's really information that's kind of outside the realm of land use. What I'll do is I'll have our code, manager provide some information, I'll email it to you as soon as possible. When it's on sidewalk, it's really outside of the planning commission's review. But certainly, it's very interesting to understand the mindset of our legislators. I'll email all that information to you.
Yeah, I think in city of park at some point, it's gonna get feedback from our existing developments and how they're performing, so we know if we can make the laws, the city, we can go to our legislators.
Absolutely.
So, the other item was regarding the air quality issue, which we mentioned. Our plan makes, reference to environmental justice areas and our requirements to increase the health safety in those areas. So, again, I'm sure that's something that's coming with our zoning law. I guess, what's the schedule for that?
So essentially, many of the environmental justice issues is going to be a part of a multiple prong approach, updating our zoning and land use regulations. Primarily, but also ensuring that we pursue the different level of technical studies to back up what we're going to have. Theories about air quality questions. I understand where you're coming from, but in order for us to require the additional work, we really do need an air quality study that says in this specific area, we have these type of situations that require that, and that the MERV 13 doesn't work. But when you have healthcare analysis, and it's done through using, technical studies that doesn't justify that and to add that condition as a mandatory requirement. We're just asking for, so that's why I make the recommendation. Oftentimes, what we're able to do is work with the applicants to, in these kind of situations, good solutions to that. So thank you for working with us, and that's very helpful for us to develop the project forward, and hopefully to set that bar eventually, step by step higher to where we want to go.
Thank you, appreciate that. And the other item I think I've mentioned previously is have that presentation on current state laws and how we can, how they limit us in terms of design review. And when I say that, I'm just like checking the boxes in terms of open space, parking, and, all those, just kind of I'm not talking about, is this the way we like it, not getting that kind of stuff, just checking the boxes with the features and.
You maybe wanting to keep it to housing laws that, generally it's a lot of times housing laws.
A lot of penalties.
Yeah, sure, I think we can give like a.
And then from there we can decide if we want
Sure.
to ad hoc committee, executive committee, or, how we want to deal with that. So those are all my comments. Appreciate staff's presentations today. We'll see if we can get some refreshments here.
Cocktails.
So, we'll adjourn to the next meeting is July 11th. 5:30, City Hall. Are we at the Ross Center next time, or are we here? Okay.
So, we're modeling it, so we're modeling council, yeah.